Hey, got to get quicker with my fingers on these buttons here. I don't have a tech person, so we're gonna bring Donna here in just a second. Let me get back to the comments where I can see y'all. Gary, Diane, thank y'all. Appreciate it. We got people that's not in the chat. I think there's a lot of people that don't understand that they have to sign up. Oh, David, you out in the woods? Man, you lucky. Hey, Mark, how's it going? Thank y'all for coming in. Yeah, I think we've got people that know me locally that they don't understand. You have to set it up where you can get in and chat. So we're gonna bring Don in. We're not gonna waste too much time. We're gonna go for about an hour tonight. He's got some amazing stories as usual, and I keep finding out new stuff about him. I had heard some of these stories, not specific stuff, but this is our October ghost focus, is what I'll call it, because I don't want to call it what some other people are, and think it's been pretty fun. And I've had people say, "Well, it's not Bigfoot." I'm like, "Yeah, you know what though? We think some of this stuff might be connected, and if we tell all these stories, and maybe you can pick something out." But uh, let's see who we got. There's Cryptic Crystal. Hey, all right, Blazer. Thank y'all. We're gonna get started here. We're gonna bring Don in.
Hey,
Good
Roger.
afternoon. How you doing?
I'm doing great. You are happy and smiling as usual.
well, well, I know why, because we got our coffee. I wasn't smiling earlier. I come in, had a long day, and I got to get up. I got to get up at 4:15 in the morning. So this works out pretty good. We can do that way. We can do more shows. I've decided, y'all. I like the long shows, like on Friday nights or Saturday nights or whatever. During the week, I know y'all don't have time to watch for an hour, and I understand that. And so what we decided to do was, instead of doing a long 2 or 3 hour show every time, we'll break them up into hour segments, and maybe some 15-minute spotlights. I've talked to some of y'all about that. So, well, Don, so Cielo, my son-in-law, told some stories the other night, and he didn't tell no anywhere near all the stories he has. I do know that, but one in particular took place in Franklin, Tennessee. You're very familiar with. I don't know if people here. It's just south of Nashville. A lot of history. A lot of this area in the southeast. Had a lot of Civil War battles. A lot of history
Yeah.
there. A lot of horrible skirmishes. Shiloh down the road was one of the bloodiest. If you read the history and read
Spring
about
Hill. Yeah.
Spring Hill. There are campsites, as you know, like at Culleoka over here, that they found. They found bullets and stuff, and it may not be or wasn't historically registered or whatever, but they may have found them in journals, and so there's been, you just don't know. And some of this stuff we've had happen in the woods, while we're out boogering, this paranormal stuff could be tied to that.
You never know. And of course, what we're going to talk about may give some insight into that. The
Yeah.
talking about
So,
the Battle of Franklin. My great grandfather was drafted in the Civil War at age 16,
wow.
and he was down at Fort Donelson, and they got kicked pretty hard there, and then they came back to uh, toward Nashville. Ended up at the Battle of Spring Hill, and was, I think, scheduled to go to the Battle of Murfreesboro, which was another pretty big battlefield. And when he got to Murfreesboro during the skirmish, he was not too far away from home, over on the other side of Wilson County,
Yeah.
and he left. He defected,
Hey,
and
it was
he
rough.
when he got back to the old family farm, he had to hide out in a cave until the war was over, because the uh, kind of like the Coal Mountain guys, if anybody that found anybody that defected, they were going to be uh, probably executed,
Well, let me
and
ask you. Let me ask you quick. Fort Donaldson. That's like 10 minutes south of Land Between the Lakes, right?
Yeah, on
Yeah,
Tennessee River.
I've been there. It's a beautiful place.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, y'all, Tennessee's not very north to south. It's not a lot of distance there. East to west, now that's different. But so a lot of these, Diane says her brother used to live in Franklin, Tennessee. So you know the area. So Don, and we could talk all night, every night, and we do sometimes. And but he brought up something a few years back that I did not know he did, and I don't know what the word for it is, but he used to hypnotize folks and dabble in that. And he's got a ghost story. I'm just going to let him just set the scene and talk about what happened. I'm going to sit back and listen to it.
All right. Well, for some who may not have heard this portion of the backstory, uh, I was in a car wreck, broke my neck when I was 17, and had a near death, out of body experience kind of a thing. And that was the impetus for starting to look for every piece of information I could find, because when the event happened, I floated out of my body and then was kind of drawn out into the universe, so to speak, and then came back. And it was such a uh, life changing experience. Uh, I just started doing research on everything paranormal, life after death books and whatnot. And but in the search for trying to find some answers, there was had a good friend of mine uh, who called me up, and he said this guy is going to be giving a seminar at uh, Belmont College, and on paranormal stuff. And he invited me to go, so he and I went up to Belmont. We sat through the seminar, and I don't even remember much about what it was about. Uh, but we were kind of intrigued with the guy that was giving it. His name was MC Radford, and he was a professional hypnotherapist, and he had a hypnosis clinic out on Knowles Road there in Nashville. And so after everybody left the seminar, my buddy and uh, Mr. Radford went down to one of the local bars and started talking about all sorts of strange things. Closed the place down. But to make a long story short, he uh, he taught me how to do hypnosis.
Wow.
And by that time, I had read Edgar Casey's stuff, The Sleeping Prophet. And I remembered that Casey said that anybody could probably do this if they could put themselves into a self-induced trance like he did. And what he had no memory of what he was saying while he was in his own self-induced trance.
And for just a second, anybody who does not know who Edward Casey is, it's Cayce. Look him up, and probably y'all have, but I'm just telling you, it's worth it. And he gives me goosebumps. But anyway, go ahead, Don.
Well, in reading Casey's stuff, all he needed was somebody's name and their birth date and where they were, where they resided. And he would give health readings. People would call in for him to diagnose illnesses and diseases. And he, in some of his readings, he would come out with something on the order, and this is hypothetical, but similar type of connections there. But he would sometimes in his trances, he would come back with a health reading that said uh, this particular entity, he called them entities, I think, uh, is suffering from diabetes from a past lifetime in Italy in 1329, and he was gluttonous in his lifestyle and whatnot, and this it carried over, So, um, just out of curiosity, uh, my friend of mine who went to the seminar with me, and uh, the first regressive hypnosis session that I ever did was with my wife, and this was we had um, probably hadn't known each other more than a couple of weeks, and we were all going to school down at MTSU, and we were over at his. He was living in a little mobile home in a mobile home park, and uh, we got to talk about it. And he said, "Hey Don," he said, "why don't you see if you can hypnotize Wanda?" And so I turned to her and I said,
So that's how you got her to marry you.
Yeah. I brainwashed her from the very beginning.
I always wondered how you did that. Okay.
So, I turned to her and I said, how would you like to be hypnotized? And she said, well, I guess, she didn't really know anything about it, didn't know what to expect. I think the first thing she asked me was what you asked me here the other day, was it dangerous?
Yeah.
And I said, no, there's nothing dangerous about it. So to make a long story short, I keep telling her she was easy. It didn't take but just a few minutes before she was in a deep hypnotic state.
So does
And
that mean does that mean she trusted you a lot?
apparently,
Possibly. Yeah.
I don't know why. She didn't really have a reason to. I'll tell. This is a funny story, but the first time we met, like I said, a couple of weeks before that, uh, I was at Gary's place in the trailer, and he was dating her roommate, and I was single, and so Gary was trying to fix me up with a date, and so he called the girl he was going with, and she said, "Well, I've got a roommate, and she said they probably get along pretty good." So they had, I think when Kathy had approached the subject with Wanda, hey, we got you a blind date. Wanda said, no, I ain't going on any blind date. And
So
Kathy
how long
finally
y'all
kind
so how
of
long have y'all been married now?
50 years this year. And
Congratulations.
so Kathy talked her into. He said, "Look, just let's go over there and you can just meet him, you know. And if you don't want to go out with him, that's fine." So as the situation turned out, I knew that they were coming over. Didn't know exactly what time, but I had jumped in the shower, and just about the time I got out of the shower, all I had on was a towel wrapped around me, and was going from the bathroom all the way across to my bedroom on the other end of the trailer as they walked in.
Oh no.
And I think Wanda said, "Oh hell no."
That's funny.
And so anyway, we've had 50 years together. But the interesting thing was, under hypnosis, I um, I told her, I said, "Go see if you can go back and uh, tell us what describe the most recent lifetime of Gary Davis, our friend." And it was like she was just watching the television screen. She just started talking and um, described him being born in Holland in 1713 or something like that.
Wow.
He was an only child. Um, His family were dairy farmers. He had a son who was when his son was around 15 or 16 years old, he fell through the ice and drowned. He was ice skating, and drowned. And, a few other details. But what was interesting after she described his past lifetime was how it seemed to connect with his lifetime this time around. And what was interesting was that he was an only child himself in this lifetime and the other one. Um, his his dad worked at DuPont there in Old Hickory, and they had a little 5-acre tract of land on Lebanon Road, and but they kept a Jersey cow for years and years, and Gary would get up every morning and go milk that cow. And later on, he married, but he and his wife never had any children. But he was great with kids. I think he was for many years was the girls basketball coach at Gallatin, and all the girls just loved him. He was one of these kind of guys that kids gravitated to. He always had a big smile, was always kidding around with them, and whatnot. And it was odd that he and his wife never had any children. And in retrospect, and kind of looking at this past life situation, it's almost like something within him didn't want to have children because he was maybe afraid to go through the heartbreak and the pain of losing a child.
Did you ask him if he was afraid of ice, like frozen water and all that? Did y'all ever ask? He had a fear of that?
No, we didn't. We really didn't discuss it that much. I know his wife had a miscarriage one time, and I don't know what else was involved, but like I said, they never had any more children. But he here again, that just dawned on me. He lost another child in this lifetime.
Right.
The parallels seem to be whatever. You know what
Weird.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll get to the ghost story now. After somehow or another, people started finding out that I could do regressive hypnosis, and I did a lot of them. There are several that are really, really interesting, and I guess if we've got time,
we can make part 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You know the guy that owns the show, so you're all right.
Okay.
And I think everybody here is hanging out listening, likes to hear the stories also. I appreciate you telling them.
So several years later, there was a lady in Mount Juliet who was a professional psychic. And when I say professional, she had New York stockbrokers and Hollywood people would call her, and she would do various card readings or astrology reports, or people would call her about, what do you think about me getting into this investment? I mean, she was a kind of a high-powered psychic. And I was in Nashville one day, or up at the old Hundred Oaks Shopping Center, and I had some questions about a horoscope that I was looking at, and I knew she was pretty good at it. So I just happened to call her up, and we started discussing what may be the effects of this particular aspect. It was somebody that was having some problems. And during the conversation, she said, "Well, guess what I'm going to do?" And I said, "Well, what's that?" She said, "I'm going to have a regressive hypnosis done."
Hmm.
And I said, "You are?" I said, "Who's going to do it for you?" And she said, "MC Radford." And he was the guy that taught me. And so I said, "Well, Carol," I said, "I can do that for you." She said, "You can?" And I said, "When do you want to do it?" She said, "How soon can you get here?"
Now.
So, yeah, she was, uh, it took me, I told her it'd be about 2 hours before I could get over there. And when I got there, another lady who was a partner of hers, I think the other lady was more of an astrologer than a psychic. And uh, both of them were there, and Carol's son was there. And she had her office and uh, kind of a sitting room in the basement of her house. And when I got there, she had white tablecloths laid off on everything. She had crosses set up. She had candles burning, and she was just a little bit leery. She said, I really want this done, but she said, you know, I don't know whether would this invite demons in or something like that. And I said, no, you don't have to worry about that. And she said, well, would you do Joy's son? Would you hypnotize Joy's son first so I can see it before I do it? And this young man was about 14 years old, uh, quiet kid. And I asked him if he would be okay with it. And he said, yeah. And so, sure enough, we took him back to his past lifetime. And it was an interesting story. He was a lot of details. He described being born in Santa Fe, Missouri, uh, which I looked it up. There is a place called Santa Fe, Missouri. Uh, his mother died when he was fairly young. He uh, his dad apparently was his dad and his uncle were in the logging business, and his dad apparently was a big, stout, rough old boy, and apparently drank a lot. And they butted heads. And when he was six, when this he described when he was 16 years old, he moved out of his daddy's house and moved into town and went to work at a dry goods store. And he ended up marrying the daughter of the owner of the dry goods store when they were 17, 18 years old. And a few years later, his uh, dad uh, burned up in a house fire. And they figured that he probably got drunk, knocked over a coal oil lantern or something.
Mm-hmm.
And but he was the only heir, so he inherited the half of his dad and uncle's logging business. And uh, he and his uncle got along fine. They were making a lot more money logging than he was working in a dry goods store. Um, and he eventually got married, had a couple of kids. And when he was around, I'm guessing the age of his oldest child was about 12. Um, so I'm guessing he was probably 28, 29 years old, maybe. He and his uncle were cutting down a big hickory tree with a crosscut saw. And the tree split up the middle, you know how they do when they start falling sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And the tree came up and hit him in the head and killed him.
Mm.
He died. And he described hanging around for his own funeral.
Wow.
And I started trying to get some information as to what he experienced in between lifetimes. Okay. And I asked him to describe, what it was like. And he said to him, it was a combination of colors and symbols and music that were just beyond belief. It was, uh, he said, indescribable kind of a thing. So I was trying to get a little deeper into that to figure out what was going on in the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
And so I told him to describe the next most significant event that he remembered. And I asked him, I said, are there any people around you? And he said, yes. He said, I said, well, how are they dressed? He said, well, they're all dressed in white. And I said, can you describe the scenery, or whatever around you? And in his hypnotic state, it was like he had his eyes closed and he was looking around. And he said, I'm in a room. He said, the walls are green. There are 3 or 4 people walking around. He said it was a red tile floor. And just about the time he said that, he just jumped like he was just totally startled. And I said, what just happened? And he said, somebody knocked the tray off. Now, his mother was sitting right there. Mm. And her mouth just dropped. And he described this bright light.
And oh, no, don't tell me.
He was describing his own birth.
Wow.
And the odd thing about it was, like I said, his mom was sitting there and her mouth was wide open. And after we brought him back up and talked about it, she said, just a few seconds after he was born, a nurse came by and bumped the delivery tray utensils off on the floor, and it made a loud bang. And that's what startled him, and he started crying. They didn't have to spank him, to get him up and breathing and that kind of thing.
Oh my!
And she said, I have never mentioned this to anyone, not to my husband, not to anybody. It was just something that happened in the delivery room, and she never thought another thing about it.
Well, that seemed insignificant at the time, but it was something that you could tie it together and know that he was telling the truth, because that's
oh
my goodness, that's crazy.
We've heard the suggestion that young children still have their past life memories, but they lose those really before they're able to talk and describe and whatnot. So that was Joy's son. So I put Carol under. She was fascinated with what she had heard. And she described her past lifetime as being born in a little town in Georgia, small town. Her daddy was the constable there. And she described the red clay soil dirt roads, but her mother passed away early. And because of her daddy's job and having to be gone and whatnot, he had a brother that lived up on the Stones River around Donaldson. And so he brought her up there to uh, her uncle and his wife, aunt and uncle, raised her uh, on the farm that they owned on the Stones River. And she described a spot on a bluff that she used to go and sit and hang her feet over and uh, just enjoy nature, enjoy the scenery and whatnot. Uh, Talked about going to a one-room schoolhouse. Um, really liked her teacher. Uh, she was a good student, um, and this was probably, from her description, was probably in the late 18 or early 1900s. There were the old Model T Fords and horse and buggy, horse and wagon still
being used.
being used.
Hmm.
And she went to work for she moved into Nashville after she got out of high school, and went to work in a dry goods store. And she named the store. It was right there on First Avenue, down there close to. It was on Broad, right there close to First Avenue. And she named the store, and the name of that store was still on the building at that time. And she had a rather mundane life, if you want to call it that. Never
Normal.
was normal, right?
Yeah.
Never got married. Never had a serious boyfriend or relationship. And she did say that there was a guy who was a cloth salesman that came by about once a month, and they had a very good platonic relationship. He would take her out to dinner and whatnot. And when she was about 28 years old, she got sick. She had a roommate in a boarding house there right off of Broad, and she got sick one winter. And the way she described her symptoms, she said she ran a high fever for several days, and her roommate wasn't very attentive, didn't take care of her much, and she died alone in that room. And she described floating out of her body and whatnot. So now we had all this taped. I used to have a little cassette tape recorder that we would tape all of these sessions with. And so I asked her, I said, "Do you know where you were buried?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "I was buried in Mount Olivet Cemetery." And well, this would be a sidetrack. But to make a long story short, about 3 weeks after that, she called me up, and she was just as excited as she can be. And she said, "You're not going to believe what I found." She said, "I found my own tombstone in Mount Olivet Cemetery there in Nashville." During the hypnosis, I would ask them what their name was, and where they were born, and whatnot. So she knew what name to look for. And apparently she went out there and started searching around and found the date of her birth, the date of her death engraved on the tombstone. And so that was a pretty interesting. So we got a kid that described his own birth, another one that found their own tombstone,
Right.
And so I got a call from MC Radford, the hypnotist, the hypnotherapist, and he was telling me that there was a woman who had moved to Nashville. Her boyfriend was a guitar player trying to get in the music business. and she was a self-proclaimed white witch, and she opened up an occult bookstore called the Bell Book and Candle Bookstore over in Green Hills.
Fancy part of town.
Huh?
Fancy part of town. Y'all don't know Green Hills is like Beverly Hills in California
Used
for
to be.
Nashville.
Yeah, used to be.
I walked in the mall one time, and just just to give you a little context, most malls they have a Toyota and they'll have the best thing in there. They have a Cadillac and all that. They had Porsches, and the
Oh yeah.
cheapest car in there was an Escalade. They had Maseratis, whatever, and Cartier, and the me and Peyton. He was about 15 years old, and
That was at the
I
Green
don't.
Hills Mall. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know how many security guys followed us around the whole time.
Hey,
We
you was
we
2'4", you could be dangerous.
yeah, they thought we was going to steal one of them porches.
So anyway, MC was telling me about this woman who had opened up this bookstore, and he said, "I think you'd enjoy." So he said she's got a guy from India who was like a hands-on uh, faith healer, if you want to call it. And she had another woman who was an astrologer. She had another woman who read the tarot cards, and of course, this was at the time that I was still looking for everything, trying to absorb and read and whatnot. So anyway, MC says, "I want you to go over there." He said, "I've told her about you," and he said, "I want you to go over there and read palms."
Oh no! Like here you go, do this.
And I said, "MC, I don't know anything about reading palms." He said, "Don't worry about it." He said, "I'm going to give you a book, you know, on palmistry." So he gave me the book, and every Saturday night, uh, she had the astrologer and the faith healer and the tarot card reader, and the next Saturday night had me over there, and it was a free deal. People would come in, and all of this was free. And for me, it was just curiosity. And so I was sitting there reading palms, and the woman who was the tarot card reader had a daughter who was about 16 years old, and she came over and sat down across the table from me, and she said, "Would you read my palm?" And I said, "Well, sure," and she laid her palms open, and the first thing I noticed is she had these grid marks from her fingers all the way to her thumb on both hands. And I said, what happened there? These were not natural lines in the hand. And she said, "Well," she said, I put my hand on a barbecue grill few years ago, and it left permanent scars, grid mark scars on her hand. And so I did the best I could do. Like I said, I didn't know whether I could read palms or not. I was just reiterating what I had read out of the book. This line means this, and if it goes in this direction, it might mean that, and whatnot. And but I was holding both of her hands in my hands, looking at them, and it was it was pretty obvious that she was having a little crush on me. I, this was before I met Wanda too. So
and this y'all, I heard this story the other day. This comes into play here in a little bit, in a good way. Not
so. Like I said, she was 16 and I was like 21 or so. And, but like I said, it was obvious that she was attracted to me. So I had gone down to the bookstore on three or four different Saturday nights, did my little thing for whatever it was worth. And after everybody left one night, MC was there, and this woman who was a self-proclaimed witch just made the statement that uh, talking something about ghosts. And Bradford said, I don't believe in ghosts. She said, I can conjure up some ghosts. And he said, you're full of bull. There ain't no way. And she said, I can carry you to a spot right now and show you some ghosts. And I had a date, so I had to leave. So I did not go with them. And that was on Saturday night. Monday afternoon, I got a call from her mother, and she says, could you meet us at the bookstore? And I said, well, yeah. Why? She said, well, there's something really, really strange going on. And I said, well, what happened? Or what's going on? And she said, well, it's something about my daughter. She said, I'll tell you when we get over there. And MC actually called me right after that. It was almost like back-to-back phone calls. And he said, could you come over to the bookstore tonight, Monday night, And I said, yeah. I said, what's going on? He said, Don, he said, you ain't going to believe this. He said, this woman and her boyfriend and the lady that was reading the tarot cards and her daughter and I got in the car, and she drove us a couple of miles down Granny White Pike down toward Franklin and pulled off on the side of the road beside a rock fence. And for people who are not in this part of the country, it's stacked rock kind of thing. And he said, we all got out, walked up to the fence, and she started doing some chants and incantations. And he said, all of a sudden, this scene appeared. Now, this rock fence was, it was far enough out of town where it was a pretty good scope of woods. It was big trees, no houses around anywhere close. And MC said, she started doing these chants, and he said, all of a sudden, this scene appeared. And it was a scene of an encampment of 12 Confederate soldiers sleeping around a campfire, and a little log cabin there. And he said there was a gray horse that walked up to the fence, and he said, I could reach out and touch him. He said, that is the thing that just kind of blew me away. And so they were there for 20, 30 minutes or so, just looking at the scene. And the daughter, the 16-year-old daughter of the woman who read the cards, she was down 15 to 20 yards away from them. And MC said, when we got ready to go, we looked down, and she was standing there talking to a young ghost girl about her same age, not verbally talking, but exchanging information, so to speak, telepathically, or thoughts or whatever. And so when they got ready to go, they called for this girl. I think her name was Jeannie, her first name. And she just ignored them. And they literally had to go down, and one of them had to grab her by each arm and almost drag her back to the car. And so they got back to the bookstore. Everybody went home.
And they could see the ghost also, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And So I got back to the bookstore. Everybody went home. Her mother was telling me that Sunday morning, she said usually her daughter got up pretty early. And she said Sunday morning by about 11:30, she still hadn't gotten up. And so she went to wake her up and shook her and whatnot, and she said that uh, she just kind of looked at her and said, "Just leave me alone, leave me alone," and which was very unlike her, you know. And she said she finally got up, got a little bite to eat, and went back to bed. And her mother was thinking, well, maybe she's feeling bad, maybe she's sick or something, But Monday morning, um, the mother tried to get her up to go to school. And she kind of refused to get up. And her mama said, Jenny, you got to get up and go to school. And she said her daughter looked her right in the eye and she said, "You are not my mother. Get out of my face." And that's when her mother got scared,
Yeah.
And so her mother called MC to come over there. He went to their house and he was going to try to hypnotize her to see what was going on. And she would not. She said, "You're not going to hypnotize me." And they were sitting there both scratching their head trying to figure out what would be the next step. And out of the blue, she said, "But I'll let Don hypnotize me."
Mm.
And so that was when I got the call. And so we met at the bookstore that night. And the bookstore was a little two-story house that had been converted into a bookstore. And upstairs, they had like a reading room with some lounge, big stuffed chairs and table lamps and a couch and whatnot. And they were already there when I got there. And so I went upstairs and the girl was sitting on the couch, kind of had her head down, almost like she was kind of in a daze or whatnot. I mean, did not appear to be uh, alert. She certainly wasn't talking. I don't know that she even said anything for a good while. And so I sat down there beside her and I said, uh, "Your mama said that it'd be okay if I hypnotized you," and she just kind of nodded her head, still didn't speak. And she was another very easy subject. She went into a deep trance in a fairly short period of time. And when I started asking her about her past lifetime, her facial features changed. Her voice changed. She spoke in a real deep, uneducated Southern drawl kind of a thing. And the story that she began to tell was that uh, her daddy was a Confederate captain. Her husband was his lieutenant, and the 12 soldiers were all that was left out of the company that they were coming back from. Uh, they were coming out of Pulaski and may have been coming back from Shiloh. Um, and they were headed to Nashville to meet up with General Hood for the Battle of Nashville or the Battle of Franklin and the Battle of Spring Hill. And during the night, a detachment of Union soldiers found them, uh, shot all the Confederate soldiers right before they ever got out of their bedrolls, um, busted into the house, uh, killed her dad and her husband, and they had two orphan children with them that they had picked up in Pulaski. And they didn't know what else to do with them, and they were hungry, and from a humanitarian standpoint, just didn't have any choice other than to try to take them, and take care of them. And so they killed her husband, they killed her father. And when the shooting started, they took these two kids and hid them under a little closet under the stairwell. And then they drug her out and raped her. And the last thing she remembered was hearing the screams of these two little kids that were being burned alive in the house. And so that was the trauma that seems to be consistent with some of the ghost situations, ghost stories. Murderers, people have been murdered,
right?
That kind of thing. And so it took me quite a while to basically convince her that she was in the wrong body, that it was okay for her to leave, that she really didn't have the right to take over another person's body. But once she accepted the fact that she still had all of her consciousness, knowledge, and whatnot, and she finally agreed to leave. And it was, you could almost see what was happening. The Jeannie just went from as far as body language or whatnot, went from being kind of tense and afraid or fearful or whatever, just a complete relaxation. She took a couple of deep breaths, and when she woke up, she looked around and said, "What's going on?" And she didn't remember anything that had happened from that Saturday night until we did the hypnosis thing and woke her up. And but what was really fascinating was the the change in her looks and the her voice, her accent, her southern drawl was totally different from Jeannie's, so that is the story of the girl and the ghost across the fence.
Well, I mean, y'all, some of the ladies in chat here, I got some questions for you, but some of y'all that are sensitive, I don't know what other word to put it. I feel like I have been all my life, at different times, a little more or whatever. The stories like intense stories like that, do they drain y'all? So, like when he was talking about the negative part of that story and the tragedy and all that, does that pull energy from y'all? It does. It feels like it does me sometimes. I get into it and with a good storyteller like Don, I put myself there in that situation. I'm always like in movies, like sometimes even in the bad parts. But anyway, yeah, Misty, you can feel the sadness.
It's you feel the pain.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I have to. I had a rough day today. When I say rough, it wasn't physically rough. It wasn't. It was mentally. And I deal with people all day that have, they're in wheelchairs. They have troubles, more troubles than us. And sometimes at the end of the day, it's not physical. It's mental. Or I don't even think it's mental. I think it's. I have to recharge. So.
Well, I do remember Casey was asked to do a reading about himself, and the answer that he got back was, you should never do more than 3 readings a day. But he had thousands of people requesting his readings, and it physically drained him.
Well, didn't Casey have headaches? Didn't he? He was fit. It hurt him after so
Not,
many.
yeah, after he kind of exceeded what his psychic energy level was
Yeah,
able to tolerate. Yes,
and
yes, yeah,
didn't
Crystal,
he?
you're right. That's empathy. You're right.
Didn't he? He kept doing it though. Didn't he push himself a
Yeah,
little too hard? Yeah,
yeah,
but
he
and for the
really did.
fact because he was helping people,
Right.
not and he yeah. So I got some questions. Uh, there's people in the chat. Is it okay if they contact you
Yeah,
through Facebook?
yeah.
Y'all, Don's on my friends list. Y'all can add him as a friend. And then do messenger, and then they've got some questions for you. Do you still do some of the hypnotizing and whatever?
I haven't done any in maybe 30 years. Um, I've got a couple of people right now that are asking me if I would do it.
Well, you had about
Uh,
3 or 4 in chat asked
uh, I think I can, but finding the time, it really has to be a place where they're comfortable and can be very relaxed, where there's nothing, no loud noises or uh, honking horns or sirens or anything that would kind of take their concentration away,
now.
during that
I don't
period. But
I don't want to offend nobody in the chat, but when I think when I first thought about this stuff, when he started talking about it, um, I've had people in my life they say that without doing what Don did. Oh, they're always somebody famous. They're always some king or queen. They're always whatever. What I like about these stories, um, is he said mundane, but it's a normal life, and that
normal life. Yeah.
to me that's more believable than yeah. And I'm sure every now and then you're going to run up on somebody that did something, but it's just you can feel it. And I've seen the stories where somebody mentioned in chat where I saw a kid one time in another country was telling he was this man and he had died and his family and their names, and they checked up on it and he was right. There's no way he could have
Yeah,
known
that
that.
that was I think that occurred in India,
Maybe
and
or several
and
places.
yeah, and his current parents, he was young, 5, 6 years
Very
old maybe,
young. Yeah.
and he kept talking about the city that he lived in, and they eventually uh, decided to go where he told them, and he walked directly to the house that he lived in. Uh, Walked out in the backyard and found a little tin container kind of thing that he had placed some little trinkets in and buried in his
Mm.
other past lifetime, and met his own wife, who was very elderly. And the families maintained a close connection relationship from until that side of the family, the past life family, had all passed away. So yeah, there's lots of stories like this
All
coming
right.
from all over the world. Yeah.
All right. Here's what I'm about to do. I'm gonna ask everybody in the chat. I know y'all like this. If you have anybody that any friends that like stuff like this, we share with them and see. Because I love y'all's comments. I mean, I learn just as much from the chat as I do from the guest. And they've had a lot of good stuff to say. Great show, great guests, and all that. And I agree. And y'all just don't know the conversations that me and this guy's had over the decades. My
Yeah.
wife will go to bed, or both of our wives will go to bed. I'll be outside. My whole neighborhood shut down and be
Yeah.
talking to Don out,
Yeah.
freezing to death.
I think if I was to say the takeaway from learning about this, having spoken with, having done these past life regressions and whatnot, is we are eternal souls, and we just keep coming back and coming back to either correct or assist by whatever talents or abilities that we gathered throughout. We're kind of the sum total today of all of our other past lifetimes. And I saw a discussion. I know we're about to run out of time here,
Oh, we're
but
good.
I saw this.
I was going to take a vote and see if they want to hear a couple more stories. I mean, because I'm, you know what I mean. But go ahead and finish your thought.
Well, the idea of a genius, somebody like was it? I guess it was. I don't know anything about famous people much, but
Right.
I think Mozart was deaf, but he wrote all of these great symphonies, or one of the classical musical writers, and the discussion was that people who have these extraordinary talents and gifts that seem to show up out of nowhere, that are not weren't kind of passed down, if you want to call it, to from their own family, had these gifts that great mathematicians, great musicians, great artists had spent many lifetimes in the same field perfecting those skills. And so they are kind of looked upon as genius today, but they earned it, if you want to call it that. And that may be what we call karma,
Well,
from one sense.
and we've discussed also maybe the possibility of maybe a new, fresh, whatever,
Approach.
tapping into um, a data bank, so to speak.
The Akashic records, or the
Yeah,
universal knowledge, or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, and the thing is, you know, things like this are hard to believe, but like when you have people you trust tell you a story, and you have these stories, and there's not just one of the young kids doing, like, giving details and directing them to another country, to specific names, to specific places, um, and telling of situations that a 4-year old shouldn't know about, and how this person passed away, and calling out the sickness and everything. When you have details like that, it's hard. You can't ignore it. I mean, you might not believe it. That, I mean, I understand that. I understand people, because when you start letting some of this in, it confuses some of your beliefs. I understand that. I don't reject hardly anything, but it's been hard for me to not accept it, but to make sense where it fits in. That's what this show is, basically, because we, one day you
I
look
know
up.
we talked not too long ago, and you were telling me, boy, all this stuff is getting hard to wrap my head around. I told you, I said, well, I apologize for dragging you down this rabbit hole, in the first place. So,
Well,
but now I do have, if you've got time, I have a really, really fascinating past life thing to talk about. It's up to you.
oh, go ahead. Now let's go. We can go another. Let's go another 20 minutes. That'll put us about an hour and a half.
All right. There
And
was,
y'all, and wait a minute, and y'all that need to go watch Mark and Larry, I understand. Um, they support us. I contact Mark with questions, and technical questions, and Bigfoot questions, and all that. So yeah, y'all go. You can go support them. This will be here. We're recording, so I appreciate you being here. But go ahead, Don.
okay. And there was a girl, I think at the time she was about 18 years old. Um, and I did 4 past life regressions on her. but the one that was the most interesting from a spiritual karmic standpoint or whatever. She described being born in the ancient city of in Samaria. This would have been probably 3000 BC. And she described being sold as a child to an innkeeper, which apparently selling your kids was not an unusual or a frowned upon cultural condition. And she described sleeping on a woven grass mat in almost a little closet kind of a thing. And when she was probably 9 or 10 years old, maybe when her parents sold her. And her job was to clean up, kind of sweep the floors and wipe the table. This was a seaport town. This inn or what we would consider to be a bar or something was just right across a cobblestone street from the Mediterranean Sea. It was a seaport town. And as she grew older, by the time she was 17, 18 years old, she said the innkeeper treated her pretty good. He didn't beat her, whatnot. But it was acknowledged that she was his slave. He bought her as a slave. And so this was a total patriarchal society. Women had no say in anything. And but as she got older, apparently she developed into a very beautiful young lady. And being a seaport town, and with her attractiveness, so to speak, it was one of the most popular places when these sailors came back from their trips. That was one of the places that they would first go to. And she knew a lot of them. Kind of reminded me of the song Brandy. And but she said one night they were just getting close to closing, and these 4 sailors came in, and they had been at sea for months, and they were drinking whatever the ale or wine or whatever the alcoholic beverage was that they were serving. And they proceeded to tie a pretty good drunk on. And the drunker they got, the more they got to kind of pawing at her and grabbing her and whatnot. And she would kind of slap their hands away when they were grabbing at her. And finally, one of them grabbed her by the arm when she walked by and jerked her over in his lap, and he started trying to kiss on her and whatnot. And she reached up and bit him on the cheek hard enough to draw blood, and pushed him away, got away from him. And she said she ran out the door across this cobblestone street onto a pier, and just to get away. And she sat down on the edge of the pier, and she was there for just a few minutes. But she described watching the full moon rising up over the ocean. It was a warm night. It was a beautiful, serene, picturesque setting. And she was thinking, well, everything's all right. Until the innkeeper came out. And he literally drug her back inside, bolted the door, and these sailors raped her. And as she was fighting them off, one of them hit her hard enough and killed her.
Oh man.
And now, keep in mind, I'm sitting right there beside her, and I mean, this is it gets to you when you hear a situation like that, you
Right.
know.
So when
And,
somebody's under like that and they're talking, do they can you tell that they're struggling? They're remembering the struggling. Can you see
oh,
the body language?
there's tears, emotions. Yes, it's almost like they're reliving the event.
Yeah. That's
And
what I that's why I asked you that earlier. I might tell everybody what may be going on later, but
so when she got through telling me that, I was just sitting there trying to think, what should I say? You know,
right,
at this
exactly.
point. And before I said anything else, she was, I noticed that she kind of smiled a little bit. And I looked at her and I said, "What are you smiling about?" And she said, "Well, I got my revenge."
Uh-oh.
And I said, "What do you mean you got your revenge?" And she said, "I was responsible for the death of each of these men."
Wow.
And
Goosebumps on the side of my face. Can y'all see them?
so I said, "How did you do that?" And she said, "I would appear and disappear." And she said, one of them, she appeared to him in an alley and it frightened him so bad he ran backwards out of the alley and tripped and was run over by an ox cart.
Oh,
Um, Another one committed suicide. Um, Another one basically drank himself to death. And another one went insane before he died
wow.
because she haunted them
Right.
to the point that it ended up killing them from one aspect or another.
Oh,
Now, there's several levels to this story, but uh, I asked her, I said, "Well, in retrospect, do you think that was the right thing to do?" And she said, "Well, I have been counseled about that."
uh-oh.
And I said, "Counseled by who?" And she said, "The Council of 20." So I started asking, I said, "Well, who is the Council of 20?" You know? And uh, as, as she was laying there on the couch, she would look kind of back toward the couch like she was listening to somebody. And then she would turn her head back toward me. And she said, "Well, I can't talk about that."
Hmm.
And I'm thinking, well, let's see if I can rephrase the question in a different way. So I asked basically the same thing, about the Council of 20. And she would turn her head and she would turn back and she said, "They have told me not to talk about this."
Hmm.
And I'm thinking, but I'm still curious enough to try it again. So I asked her the third time and she turned her head and then she snapped her head back at me, still completely under hypnosis. And she said, "I have been told to tell you to stop this line of questioning right now." And
Hmm.
I'm thinking, oh my, what have I tapped into here? Um, and so that I kind of shut up for a minute and I was kind of quiet. And then she turned her head away again. And this is where it got real interesting. She said, "They wanted me to tell you that you would know the answers to these questions before your lifetime is over." Now, that was kind of freaky enough, woo woo land kind of stuff. don't know exactly what that means yet. But after I woke her up, after I brought her back up, I said, do you think that you have had any contact with any of these men since that period of time? And the tears started rolling down her cheeks, and she said, I know exactly who they are.
Mm.
These are my 4 brothers today. She said she had 4 brothers and 2 sisters, an older sister and a younger sister. And she said, for some reason, my brothers were always overprotective of me. And she said, it wouldn't matter where I was or what kind of situation I was in. If I needed any of the 4 of them, they would be there. And this is kind of how the karmic situation plays out, because I think the fact that they killed her was an accident. They didn't mean to. They did it in a drunken stupor, not held accountable for their actions, so to speak, under their intoxication and whatnot. But the universe put them all back in the same family to work this deal out, for them to repay their debt to her, if you want to call it that. Now that's what I call karma. That can be good karma,
Yeah.
in a sense. But that was that was one of the more interesting regressions that I have done.
And how many more?
You're right.
How many more? How many more stories do you have like that? I mean, just ballparking. I know you said you did a lot of them. I mean, because I think everybody, Adjustment Bureau, I think everybody is, me especially, because some of these I haven't heard. They're enjoying. I think my Heather just joined the chat. She's in there watching. I told her I was going to go for an hour. But
well, we can't ever shut up when we get talking.
no, she knows. So she's used to it. That's why I love her so much. She lets me do my thing, and I don't know. Sometimes I'm thinking she's gonna be mad, and she just she may blow up. She may kill me tomorrow. I don't know. But so far she's been easy going. Yes, we can do this. It don't have to be October for this. We can do this once a month if y'all want to. Oh yeah. And y'all, there's only 11 left in chat. People are going over to watch Mark.
I understand that they need to. Yeah. Everybody, y'all all support each other.
Yeah, and I'm gonna tell y'all that's left here. I'm gonna say this one time unless it happens, and then I'll announce it. So I've been in contact with, and y'all may know who he is, with several people. I made a lot of contacts, and I was asked to take part of the study that's going to be done. It's going to be I don't know if it's going to be a documentary or a series, but it's going to be where they're going to use hypnosis as a scientific tool for these witnesses for Bigfoot, and to try to get detail out. And I told them, I said, mine's not that, 180, 200 yards away. Wouldn't be that detailed. But the producer is supposed to call me. He apologized for not getting back with me. He said he'd call me sometime this weekend. But it's interesting because I said no at first, and it's not set in stone. But what scared me was the hypnosis thing. But what I did tell them was I don't think I deserve for the Bigfoot, because I think they'll be wasting it on me because of the distance that I saw. And I know a lot more people that have up close where they can give you, details, really details, 20, 30 yards, away. But I did tell the producer that I've seen two orbs, two legit orbs, uh, two legit UFOs in my lifetime. Lived in a haunted house, had reoccurring dreams, deja vu, and this guy has a history of doing shows like that. And he said, "I want to talk to you." So, if it does happen, y'all be the first to know, and I'll have to face one of my fears, flying. I'd have to fly to another state and do all that. So, like I said, it may not ever happen, but I was recommended by somebody that I met, and the reason they recommended me because they, I really don't know. We just hit it off, and so
Well,
anyway,
let me throw something back that
all
we
right.
had talked about here just a couple of days ago. Who was it that asked you, wonder if Bigfoot has ghosts too?
Oh, that was my yeah. After the show the other night, if y'all watch Cielo, my son-in-law, we went in. Of course, after we do these shows, we have to kind of settle down a little bit because it's fun. I get into it, and so you ask some of these people that do shows, you have to wind down a little bit. So we were sitting in there, and we were having discussions about the paranormal and all that. And he said, "Well, I would like for you to take us Bigfoot hunting." I'm like, "Well, if I did, what I would do, I would sit in the truck with you guys." And he said, "Yeah, I want to feel if there's a certain energy when they show up." I mean, that's a good idea. Since you're sensitive and all. And we were talking about, I said, we've had some strange things happen out there, and I don't know whether it's the Bigfoot and the Woo or it's separate. And there was an old sawmill that was there in the 1800s. It's gone, but I've heard a woman laughing at two separate occasions. I've told y'all during the day, nobody's there. We've had orbs. My wife Heather saw a orb with me, and for 20 minutes or so before it faded out, changed shapes. Stayed in one spot in a tree, 10 foot up. There are other things, and he blew my mind. He looked at me and he said, "Why can't there be Sasquatch spirits?" And I was like, "Oh
That
crap!"
opens up a whole new area of exploration. It does.
Yes, I mean, and I'm like, and other people may have talked about this. I don't know. I haven't looked it up, but I didn't. I'm like, you got to go. I won't be able to sleep tonight thinking about this. But it's just strange that we
It's something to
thought
think about anyway. Yeah.
it's something to think about, something fun to talk about.
But
Who
maybe
knows?
maybe that's why some seem to be able to cloak.
Blazer, I like your sense of humor. I like your. I love people that are quick. It takes me a minute sometimes. I saw this comment a couple of times. I'm gonna put it up here. Bigfoot is a gray in a ghillie suit. If I pronounced that right, you never know.
Yeah, Gilly Suit is right. That's
Yeah.
correct pronunciation.
Now,
Yeah.
what did Heather say? She's got people laughing. Hold on, and they're laughing at me. I'm sure. Y'all don't listen to her.
Uh,
Oh, what network? Yeah, it would be either the History Channel or Discovery. It'd be I think because of the work this fella's done before, and they're going to do a. It's going to be a legit doctor and all this. That's what I asked Don. I said, "Is this dangerous?" And I told him I would love to pull out details of the UFOs because here's the thing with those situations. The one happened when I was so small, I thought it was a dream, and I didn't. My dad told the story a couple years before he passed away, and that was like, wait a minute, that was real. Then I started telling him what I thought I had dreamed. He said, no, that's what it was. It looked like one of those '50s diners flying by with people looking out the windows. And I would love to get the
that's
details.
pretty good.
So I would love to get the details of that. Because the one that came across in Mooresville there and then went straight up and just made me question everything I thought I knew. I didn't tell anybody that for a few years, and I think I went and got in the car and I was thinking about it, and it's like it faded away for a little while, which is weird. And I talked to Guy. I'm not gonna be mean to her. She'll kill me in my sleep, Misty. Um, um, I met a guy today. We There's people all around you. Unless you talk to them, you don't know. I won't say his last name is Colin, but he was helping some people today. He was being quiet, and we drove we drove by this house that was close to these people's house. And I said, I used to live there when I was 2 and 3 years old. That place is haunted as everything. And I thought, I'm not gonna get a comment. He woke up. He said, "Now you're talking my jam." So he started telling me UFO stories. He said, "I got ghost stories," and
Right here in town. Yep.
right here in town.
Yep.
And he said when him and his wife saw this UFO, and I may have him on the show later. We're talking about it. He sent me an email and a description. He said the funny thing about it was that they both felt sick. They both felt queasy stomach, like there's an energy. They went home, didn't talk about it for a couple hours, 2.5 hours, started feeling better. And they started discussing it. He said then he went crazy researching everything he could on the internet or whatever. So uh, he I got a subscriber right there in the van. I gave him my address and he did it. So discussing this, it's a gamble. Some people think you're crazy, but at this point I don't care. I'll throw it out there and see what sticks. So anyway, y'all, I appreciate you being here. I'm gonna turn on Mark and Larry, this Sawdust Beast. I'm gonna check them out. Um, y'all go subscribe to them. Also, they have a lot of good guests. They focus a lot on Bigfoot, Dogman, and Misty knows they go hunting, and some blue eyed. Y'all know them. Y'all probably all know them. And I just appreciate them kind of welcoming me in, Misty and the Woodwalkers, Spencer and Greg. Uh, I have to leave the phone out in the street so I can get some sleep at night because Greg don't sleep, Misty don't sleep, and I'm like, oh my god, what are they talking about? And then I have to catch up for 2 hours in the morning. So,
Well,
uh,
you got this guy that I was telling you about from NASA
yeah,
responded.
yeah.
Said he'd be glad to do it.
Rick said finally got back just in time for the end. My freeze dryer got delivered tonight. Oh, cool. Yeah, we need a lot of people.
Stock up,
Y'all,
folks.
hey, listen, and I'm gonna say this right here at the end. Y'all be careful tomorrow. Y'all be careful every day, but y'all know what's going on. My son. This is well, I don't.
There were 17 cities listed on a potential hit list.
Yeah.
Nashville is one of them.
Um, I'm. I can't. I don't know if I can tell everything. Um,
Might not ought to,
so
right?
no, I just so somebody in my family's been advised from somebody that could advise quietly that a lot of the stuff you're seeing may be propaganda, but that warning is they're taking it serious. They Here's the bad part though. They're on reactive alert. They're not on they know where things are, but they can't take action until something happens. So I might get in trouble for saying that, but I'll never tell who told me. So if I disappear, y'all
Well,
know.
if we ever start talking about politics,
Yeah. So
there's 100 rabbit holes right there too.
yeah, and this is just being real, y'all. It's
Sure.
nothing. This has been going on for thousands of years, and um, just be careful. I mean, I'm not, and like I said on Facebook the other day, I've had trouble in these times figuring out who the good guys are and the bad guys are, but because we're shown AI stuff, we're shown we don't know. So I just pray to for God to protect the innocent. That's all you can do. So anyway, y'all, thank y'all for stopping by. Rex, make me some food, and I'll buy it from you. Misty, thank y'all. Blazer, all y'all. I enjoy doing this. I learn a lot. I hope y'all are. Thank you for all the good feedback. I'm getting emails and met Facebook Messenger. Don, they love you. So just keep it up, and we'll do this. We'll do this quite a bit. Like I said, who's going to tell us not to, right?
All right. I'll holler at you in the morning.
Yes,
We'll
sir.
talk again.
Thank you. Y'all have a good night. Y'all share
All
this and get people to subscribe, please. Bye. Let's see if we get it.